I've said it before, and I'll say it a million times over and over again as much as I have to. Soul Eater is 100% without a doubt my favorite manga of all time. Now, there's a certain reason why I always specify it as my favorite manga and don't even mention the anime. And that is because after episode 38 of the Soul Eater anime, it becomes a completely original story. Since I read the manga first, I got the canon story, and when I finally decided to watch the anime shortly after I finished, I stopped after the story became non-canon. Even as of writing this script, I still have not seen the ending of Soul Eater, so I decided why not make a video out of it. Today I will be going through the first 38 episodes of the Soul Eater anime and roughly the first 39 chapters of the Soul Eater manga, and answering the question, was the Soul Eater anime really that bad? For the sake of organization and my own sanity, I will be splitting this video up by each arc in Soul Eater. So first up we have the introduction of our main cast, the Prologue. The Prologue covers chapters 0.1, 0.2, and 0.3 of the manga, and episodes 1, 2, and 3 of the anime. I'd say for the most part, these chapters are adapted pretty much perfectly. As with most anime adaptations, the art style present in the anime is more styled after the author's art at the time, rather than what the art style of the manga was in the beginning, and I have to say, it looks amazing. As a whole, the Soul Eater anime is very visually appealing, especially for an anime of this time. The animation is amazing, and the art style really complements the series in every way imaginable. Now, for a straight up comparison, and if I had to choose which version of the Prologue is better, I'd have to give it to the anime. Not only is the art style better here in my opinion, but the anime cuts out a decent chunk of what I like to call Okubo's biggest weakness, his use of fan service. For the people who have not read or watched Soul Eater, or even the ones who have, I'm willing to bet you have seen this character before. This is Tamaki Kotatsu from Fire Force, another series created by Okubo. Tamaki is often seen as a pure fanservice character who serves no other purpose than to be eye candy for the target demographic, which is young boys. It's literally what shonen translates to. While I disagree with this, it's definitely understandable why somebody would come to this conclusion, especially after the first two seasons of the Fire Force anime. And while I don't really care about fanservice that much, I think the use of fanservice in the first 5 to 7 chapters of Soul Eater is atrocious, and the anime just gets rid of a decent amount of the unnecessary stuff like random upskirt shots of the female characters. I also think the anime benefits greatly from its soundtrack, which is absolutely amazing. The music in Soul Eater really catches your attention and amplifies the scene no matter what's going on. It has such a wide variety of music ranging from late 90s to early 2000s hip hop to rock and everywhere in between. It's really just a wild ride, especially wearing headphones watching this anime. Overall, I really enjoyed the first 3 episodes, and I just gotta say it was done better than the manga, so good job to the anime on this one. A very, very strong start. The Remedial Lessons Arc covers chapters 1 through 3 of the manga and episodes 4 through 6, and serves as a way to give us our first look at some of the character dynamics, and introduces a couple of new characters who will be important for the rest of the show with Stein and Sid. Like with the first 3, I have to say these chapters were adapted pretty damn well. The anime, of course, gets rid of the unnecessary fan service I was talking about earlier, so it makes this arc very easy to watch. Each chapter and episode has a fight that serves as its focal point, so we'll be talking about those here. The first fight is the fight versus Sid the Zombie, which I honestly prefer in the manga. Even though I prefer the anime's art style here, I think Sid himself just looks better in the manga, and is slightly more menacing. I also just think that the early Soul Eater art style, especially when it comes to environments and backgrounds, looks very good for a fight that takes place in a graveyard, if that makes any sense to you guys. The second fight is the fight versus Stein, and I really prefer the anime versions of this fight. Stein's comedic moments hit a lot more in the anime, as well as his dialogue. I watched Soul Eater dubbed, and I really have to praise Stein's voice actor, Chuck Huber, who also voices a couple of my favorite anime characters, that being Android 17 from Dragon Ball and Hiei from Yu Yu Hakusho, my favorite anime character of all time. Just an observation, I guess. Besides Stein himself, the actual fight is good here too. Even though this fight is a 3-on-1, it never feels too cluttered and the scenes flow smoothly. Again, the anime soundtrack only further enhances everything, so I think the anime did it very well here. The last part of this arc is arguably the most important, which is Soul and Black Star versus Kid. This fight's purpose is to finally bring our entire main cast together, but also establishes Kid's place in the group. The anime and manga for this is pretty much the same, but I actually have to say I prefer the anime for this fight. The animation and choreography here are amazing, and Kid being the focal point here absolutely kills it in every aspect. His comedic moments, action, and voice acting are simply perfect. Again, the OST is great and every instance of music fits the scene well. This episode overall is just one of my favorites in the show. The Demon Sword arc, which covers chapters 4 through 6 of the manga and episodes 7 through 9 of the anime, is really the start of the overarching story of Soul Eater, whereas the first 6 episodes were used to introduce important characters and concepts. Here we meet the main antagonist, Medusa Gorgon, a witch, and Krona, a child who Medusa is trying to make into a Kishin. When I say the anime absolutely killed these episodes, I fucking mean it, man. The anime sells Krona's awkwardness and weirdness so well. The facial expressions, the voice, the character acting, everything is absolutely perfect surrounding Krona's adaptation. I also feel like here is a good time to talk about the fight choreography in Soul Eater, since this is the first fight with actual stakes. This fight has some amazing choreography, and how Maka and Stein fight with a scythe is so engaging and interesting. Maka used the top of the scythe to dodge a low swing from Ragnarok, punched the shit out of Krona, went for a slice with Soul, missed it, and then used the missed swing as momentum to flip behind Krona and pin them down. And I'm just supposed to sit here like that shit didn't happen right in front of my face. Another thing that these episodes do is further build the relationship between Maka and Soul, and starts their whole dual character arc, which is portrayed very well here. I feel the right emotions watching them interact after Soul sacrifices himself in their fight with Krona. The last episode is a Black Star and Kid episode, introducing their dynamic and also introducing Excalibur, one of the best gag characters in anime. The anime makes his annoying personality very apparent, but not annoying to the point where you don't want to watch the episode. Overall, this is a great start to the story. The Enchanted Sword Arc, or the Uncanny Sword Arc as it's called in the manga, covers chapters 7 through 9 of the manga, or episodes 10 through 12 of the anime, and largely focuses on deepening Black Star and Tsubaki's relationship through her fight with her brother Masamune, the Uncanny Sword. This is the best arc in the series so far. It does an amazing job establishing Black Star and Tsubaki's dynamic, while also giving us some of the best animation I've ever seen. This anime is from 2008, by the way. Not to say that anime that are 15 years old can't look good, but some of the stuff in Soul Eater is on par, if not better than some stuff that comes out now. This is a perfect adaptation from the manga, which also has some amazing art now that I think about it. Tsubaki vs Masamune in the manga is the first time I was truly amazed by the art in Soul Eater, and not to repeat myself again, but the voice acting here is absolutely amazing, especially from Tsubaki.
You're wrong! I won't let you call me a pathetic flower! I have a friend who's helped me realize something. He's helped me see that a camellia does have a fragrance!
Who was voiced by the Monica Rial. You know, the voice of Bulma, Froppy from MHA, Mei from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Iori from Kokoro Connect, and many, many more. Everything here is done perfectly, and I'm honestly very impressed with the anime so far. Episode 12, the end of this arc, brings focus back to the main plot and gives more attention to Soul and Maka's ongoing character arcs. This episode introduces us to another antagonist, Erica, who is one of Medusa's fellow witches. And while not technically a part of the next arc, this episode serves as setup for the next one, so we can just start talking about that one now. This next arc is actually just two completely disconnected episodes, which are episodes 13 and 14. These two adapt chapters 10, 11, and 12 and cover the end of Soul and Maka's dual character arc and the super written exam. Episode 13, which covers chapters 10 and 11, introduces another side antagonist, the Immortal Wolfman, Free. He is incredibly entertaining in the anime and has an amazing design. Aside from Free, this episode wraps up Soul and Maka's dual character arc, and I have to say, the anime kinda dropped the ball on this one. I think it's fine besides the fact that the anime cut out a few pages that were in the manga that showcased the current state of Soul and Maka's relationship, which is faltering at the moment, which makes them unable to fight together. And I think the exclusion of these pages in the anime makes the fact that they are completely unable to function with each other kind of unbelievable. Besides that unfortunate exclusion, I'd say the anime adapted these two chapters pretty well, but I'd have to say the manga was better here. Episode 14, as I mentioned earlier, covers the Super Written Exam, and this is one of the, if not the funniest anime episode I've ever seen. And every time I rewatch it, it only gets better. This episode takes every character and makes them as goofy and wacky as possible, and it's just such a treat to watch. Even if you haven't seen Soul Eater, I recommend watching this episode just by itself. You don't necessarily need any outside context to understand what's happening. Every joke hits in a way that will guarantee to make me laugh, and I can really tell the voice actors had a ton of fun with this episode. 100% better than the manga. The Black Dragon arc, adapting chapters 13 through 15 into episodes 15 and 16, are more focused on the trio of Kid and his two weapon partners, Liz and Patty. However, since they are pretty much a completely developed group as far as their overall dynamic is concerned, we don't focus on developing them, but instead exploring the parts of the dynamic that we haven't got to see quite yet. These three are extraordinarily entertaining, having a few of my favorite comedic moments thus far. Kid, as always, is completely ridiculous when it comes to his obsession with symmetry. Patty being extremely dumb and cheerful, but not to the point where it gets annoying, is very funny. And Liz being easily frightened and usually being the only one with common sense to balance out the other two wraps this trio together perfectly. Another thing I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but couldn't really find a place to fit it in, is the use of CGI in Soul Eater. And while I think that CGI in anime can be a little distracting, especially when it isn't done well, I have to say that the CGI used in Soul Eater fits very well. This, of course, is 2008 CGI, so it might not blend well with the 2D animation. But I think it works perfectly for a show like Soul Eater, where you have a laughing sun, a smiling moon that bleeds from time to time, people turning into weapons, and a bunch of other wacky shit going on. The massive CGI school that shows at the beginning of every episode doesn't really stand out that much, but there are a few other instances of CGI, especially in these episodes, that are done pretty well, especially for 2008. So I have to really give it to Bones for the quality of it. The last thing I want to touch on is Kid's fighting style, which is showcased very well in these episodes, and it's probably my favorite in the series. Even though his weapons are twin pistols, he's extremely agile and capable of fighting in close quarters, which makes for some amazing action scenes like his brief scuffle with Krona in this arc. These episodes are done pretty well, so I think I'll have to give it to the anime again. Episode 17 is Soul Eater's one and only true filler episode, so I won't spend too much time talking about it. I actually skipped this episode on my first watch through of the canon part of Soul Eater, so after experiencing it for the first time, all I have to say is, what in the hell did I just watch? Like, this episode makes me think the writers were on crack in a good way. Centering around none other than Excalibur himself, we hear his tale of how he led a gang, framed Watson, couldn't get hard, fell in love, and fought King Arthur. And no, I did not make any of those things up. This is such a funny episode and definitely one of the best filler episodes I've ever seen. Episodes 18 through 24, or manga chapters 16 through 23, is the longest arc in the canon part of the Soul Eater anime, sporting the incredibly long name of A Fight to the Death at the Anniversary Celebration arc, and it is exactly what it sounds like. This is the first big event stemming from every plot point up until now, and I have to say it's one of my favorite arcs in Soul Eater, and the anime almost adapts this perfectly. I only have a few gripes with the anime, which I will get to later, but it's not actually enough to completely decide if the manga is better or not, so this is our first tie. This arc has so many highs and not many lows. The animation throughout all 6 episodes is incredibly consistent and good looking, alongside each voice actor giving it their all. The fight scenes are adapted almost perfectly, and every fighting style present is a treat to watch in action. As I mentioned earlier, watching scythe combat is incredibly entertaining to me, and we're lucky enough to see two scythe meisters, Maka and Stein, in action since they give us our two main fights of this arc. Everything, from the choreography to the animation and even the impacts, are done well, and the only thing holding me back from calling these perfect fights is that the anime censors a lot. In the manga, we have shit like Maka grinding Krona's face against her scythe, and Stein stabbing Medusa in the face to kill her, and that just isn't present in the anime, which takes away a little bit of the edge that's kind of needed in this setting. Even in Krona's flashback, the rabbit that Medusa is trying to make Krona kill was turned into a tiny dragon creature, which really lessens how cruel and heartless Medusa is, and how broken Krona is because of her. While all this stuff is just tiny in retrospect, sometimes the tiniest of details can stop something from being perfect. However, while we're on the topic of fights, I just want to say that despite the censorship, Black Blood Madness Maka is done extremely well here. The character and voice acting are phenomenal, and it's just a really fun scene. Another thing I'd like to talk about here is how well Soul Eater is able to convey suspense and horror. All of the scenes of Erika and Free approaching the Kishin feel so eerie, and to my surprise, they made the Kishin, Ashura, almost as creepy as he is in the manga. The scene of him putting his skin back on made me more uncomfortable than any other anime has, and his presence in general is terrifying in a sort of mysterious way. While it does have its little problems, this is definitely the best showing from the anime adaptation so far. The Trial Enrollment Arc takes place in chapters 25 through 27 of the manga and episodes 24 through 26 of the anime, and I honestly don't have much to say about it. As far as the faithfulness of the adaptation goes, it's done pretty damn well, but it wasn't really anything spectacular animation wise. As usual, the comedy translated to the anime very well, and I had some good laughs watching. Here we're introduced to 3 of the 8 Death Sides, Marie, Azusa, and Justin, and each of them are extremely entertaining in their own right. One thing I will say that I loved about this arc is the scene of Stein's slow descent into madness. It's actually just done better in the anime than it is in the manga. Him being pulled into his computer screen by the hands of insanity just for him to look up at the camera and reveal that his face was replaced with the eyes of the Kishin was an amazing touch. Besides that, the most important thing that this arc does is introduce our new main villain for now, Arachne, the oldest Gorgon sister and older sister to Medusa. Arachne gives off such a chilling aura and just demands attention whenever she speaks. Voiced by Stephanie Young, who also voices characters such as, let's see here, Nico Robin, Olivia Armstrong, Towa, and Nana Shimura, Arachne has one of my favorite voices in the anime. Since I don't have anything overwhelmingly positive or negative here, I decided to nitpick, and I noticed that in one scene, Marie says she's going to make tea while very clearly holding a jar of coffee grounds, and I just find that kind of hilarious. Overall, I just want to say that this is a tie of sorts, but I guess I prefer the anime for what they did with Stein here. Also for Arachne. The Bodyguard Arc, covering chapters 27 and 28 of the manga, or just episode 28 in the anime, is the shortest arc in both versions and is probably the best episode in the entire anime. There's only one problem with this episode, so I'll talk about it now so I can praise it without restraint. In the last arc, specifically in the last episode of the last arc, we begin a character arc for Soul, who feels like he is helpless without Maka, even though he is the same type of weapon as Justin or Giriko, who can function without a Meister. In this arc, in addition to Blackstar, who we will get to later, Soul also wants to go to Baba Yaga Castle to seek revenge on Arachne for paralyzing Maka. However, he realizes that he would just be a walking target, and this is such a great scene for Soul. I really feel for him here, and it makes him much more relatable. I, personally, would like an explanation as to why this scene was entirely cut from the anime. Nowhere to be found. I guess Soul just doesn't feel bad anymore? It's almost like Bones knew this anime was going downhill soon and didn't want to set up anything they wouldn't deliver on. But besides that, this is the best episode in the entire show. I haven't mentioned it much or even at all, but I absolutely love Sid, so seeing him do his stealth and assassination shit was so cool. Obviously, Sid isn't the main event of this episode, which brings us to the big man himself, Black Star in his second fight with the sword god Mifune. This fight is amazing. This fight takes one of the most unique approaches in the music department by playing Paper Moon by Tommy Heavenly 6, which is also used as the second opening of Soul Eater, throughout the entire duration of the fight, and it was an absolutely amazing decision. On top of the music, this fight has some amazing choreography as well, with Mifune stealing the spotlight by using his infinite sword style. The way he moves around the area picking up his scattered katanas makes me want to pay attention to the screen and just pulls me into the episode. Stuff like throwing his swords in between the chain links on Tsubaki's Kusarigama and using them as footing is just one example, and it's so fun to watch. This is such an amazing fight and an exceptional episode overall. The Reunion Express arc, or Runaway Express in the anime, is chapters 29 through 32 in the manga and episodes 29 through 31 in the anime, and the anime version of this makes my head hurt for a few different reasons. First of all, they rearrange events for seemingly no good reason. In the manga, the party that Kid is throwing after Maka recovers from Arachne's curse is the setup to the actual event, that being his fight on the Reunion Express. Kid, Liz, and Patty leave the party in order to pursue the Eternal Spring, and it just makes things feel better. However, in the anime, they just kinda go there. We don't learn that he's on this mission as an order from death, and it just seems kind of sudden. And the party also just kinda happens for no reason now. I feel like you could argue the anime made the party more for Krona than Maka to make us feel worse when Krona is eventually manipulated again by Medusa, but everything involving Krona in the party happens in both the anime and the manga. Nothing is cut and nothing is added, so this just feels like a random decision that chops out the flow of the story. Also, while Krona is so fresh in our minds, I just want to say that they are adapted perfectly in the anime in every aspect, and I love it. I genuinely want to cry when I see how much anguish and regret Krona feels after being dragged back into Medusa's clutches. The last thing I want to talk about for this arc is the actual event episode, episode 30, which is Kid's battle on the Reunion Express. As with all events involving Kid's group, this episode is extremely entertaining, and for some reason the animation really pops off at the end of the episode, and makes it one of the better fights to come from the anime. This arc could have been perfect, but I have to say the manga is better here just because it flows a lot better. As of episode 31, we finally reached the second opening of Soul Eater, so I've decided to take a brief intermission to talk about both of the openings here before we hit the final stretch of canon episodes. Opening 1, titled Resonance by TM Revolution, is pretty damn good. The song itself is really easy to listen to and kinda catchy as well. The visuals in this one are used to showcase the world of Soul Eater, and it does so very well, taking advantage of Soul Eater's unique art style. This opening plants itself into your mind by showing you the wide cast of characters and their abilities while keeping a rather lighthearted tone. I've seen a lot of reactors say this opening gives off a Halloween vibe, and I'd have to agree. Overall, this is an amazing opening and perfect for the first half or so of Soul Eater. Opening 2, titled Paper Moon by Tommy Heavenly 6, sticks around from episode 31 until the end of the anime, and I prefer this one much more than Resonance, which again I enjoy greatly. This opening has a much darker tone in both song and visuals, starting off with a chilling guitar that leads into somber vocals. The visuals here cover events such as Stein's sent into madness, the battle for BREW, and Krona falling back into the hands of Medusa, as well as probably foreshadowing events that I'm not even aware of since I haven't seen the non-canon portion. We also get inclusions for characters who weren't around for the first opening, like the Death Sides, Arachne and her group, and Killick, Ox, and Kim and their partners, who graduate from background characters to true side characters in the following arcs. I love this opening so much. It's honestly just one of my favorites of all time, and I'm happy Soul Eater got a great set of openings. Episode 32. I'm not gonna lie, I forgot which chapter this is, but it really doesn't matter. This episode can't really be considered an arc. It's just a standalone story that has no relevance outside of this episode and the chapter that it's adapted from. This is the third Excalibur episode, or the second Excalibur chapter, and it introduces us to Hero, the laughingstock of the DWMA, who I'm almost convinced was a prototype for what would eventually become Arthur from Fire Force. Like the other Excalibur episodes, this one is just hilarious, and there's not much more I can say about it without repeating myself. Another thing this episode does is formally introduce Killick, who is apparently on par with Kid and Blackstar in strength. As I mentioned earlier, Killick becomes a decently important character in a future arc, so it's good to cover him here. This is just a gag episode, and I think the comedy in Soul Eater translates extremely well to the anime, so I'll say the anime nailed it here. The BREW Tempest Arc covers chapters 33 through 37 of the manga and episodes 33 through 36 of the anime. Before we get into an arc-wide review, I want to talk about episode 33 specifically, because I see a lot of people misunderstand what happens between Maka and Blackstar here, which isn't necessarily bad because the build-up to it is extremely subtle. First, let's focus on Maka, who is currently going through an inferiority complex. Maka, after being helpless against Arachne, and pretty much over the entirety of the story actually, has been wanting to get stronger, and during the Team Soul Resonance practice, she feels like her progress is being halted by Blackstar, who she is not only weaker than, but is belittled by. Maka becomes jealous of Blackstar's strength here. Now, for Blackstar, ever since learning his first win against Mifune was a fluke and getting destroyed by him the second time, Blackstar has been pushing himself to master the Uncanny Sword, which is both difficult for him and causing a negative effect on his body. He is angry with himself now, and when he feels like Maka, who is weaker than him, is halting his progress, they clash. On a surface level, this seems like drama that comes out of nowhere, but the build-up is definitely there. As for the actual battle for BREW goes, I'd have to say this is the best adapted arc of the anime. Everything here is done faithfully, and even the one thing they did add, that being Demon Hunt or Genie Hunter, was great. Mifune vs. Sid is one of the most entertaining fights of the anime and kinda stole the show for me. Both of these characters are extremely skilled and have such cool fighting styles, so seeing them duke it out was truly amazing. Another thing I really liked in this arc, which is kind of random, is the balance of Killick, Ox, and Kim's team. Kim and her partner Jacqueline, who is a lantern by the way, have fire abilities. Ox and his partner Harver have lightning abilities. And Killick and his two partners, Pot of Fire and Pot of Thunder, obviously have both. It's so random, but it's a nice touch that I love for some reason. Their fight scenes also have a lot of care put into them. They look gorgeous, and it's nice to see side characters like them get good treatment. The biggest and most important fight in this arc is Maka, Blackstar, and Kid versus Mosquito, and this fight is pretty much adapted perfectly besides the end where Maka uses Demon Hunt, which doesn't appear in the manga until the Clown arc shortly after where the anime stops being canon. It's almost like Bones knew this anime was going downhill soon and decided to squeeze in one more thing from the manga. Anyway, this arc is really good, and I hope I can say the same for the next one, the end of the canon Soul Eater anime. The Internal Investigation arc covers chapters 38 through 40 and loosely, and I mean loosely, gets adapted into episodes 37 through 39. The entirety of episode 37 is non-canon already, so I'm skipping it. The introduction of Joe Butataki is here, which is from the manga, but none of the other events from the chapter he was introduced are present. By the way, I'm splitting these last episodes up because the arc it's supposed to adapt doesn't happen in the anime, but there are still elements and even entire events from the manga present, like this next one. Episode 38 takes Joe Butataki and throws his entire character out the window. Instead of being the investigator with soul perception so strong he can tell when someone is lying just by reading their soul's wavelength, the anime turns him into a technician with an over-exaggerated obsession with coffee, and that is all I have to say about that. The main event of this episode is Blackstar vs. Kid, and the fight is ripped straight out of the manga almost to perfection. The problem is the events around this fight being warped. In the manga, Blackstar learns from Nigus that he shouldn't use the Uncanny Sword anymore because it's putting a great amount of stress on his soul, and that a normal person would have already died from it. In the anime, this entire conversation is removed, and instead of his soul being damaged, the Uncanny Sword is just stressing out his body. The entire point is that Blackstar's body can probably withstand it, but his soul cannot. Another thing good old Bones removes is the fact that Blackstar's quest for power is leading him down the path of a demon instead of the path of someone who could surpass God. And the worst part is that after everything is said and done, the issue is just resolved. Blackstar just goes back to doing push-ups, and I'm supposed to believe that he's recovered from his loss. And I, for one, refuse to accept it. The way I interpreted this entire arc leads me to believe that Blackstar doesn't need to train his body, but instead train his mind and more importantly his soul in order to master the Uncanny sword. But nah, he did some push-ups so he's fine, I guess. Episode 39 just also doesn't exist and is completely non-canon, so this is unfortunately where the first part of this mini-series ends. Hello, you've made it to another RayKX outro, and I just want to say that I couldn't fit this part in the video anywhere, but I want to say that the Soul Eater pacing is incredible. As you've probably noticed, every chapter is one for one with almost every episode, and the reason for that is that Soul Eater chapters are long as hell. Something like, let's say One Piece for example, has chapters that are usually around 16 to 20 pages long most of the time, and you can't really make an entire episode out of those without having to add in a lot of filler and still shots, which is kind of why I don't really like the One Piece anime that much, but that's a different story. Soul Eater chapters are 50 pages long, and so that translates very well to an anime setting because entire chapters get animated in one episode and it's almost one for one. So yeah, the pacing in Soul Eater is absolutely incredible. But as far as the outro goes, I'm sorry for how long this video took. I'm terrible at watching anime. It takes me so long, so at some point I just had to suck it up and start watching Soul Eater for 3-4 hours a day. But yeah, this video, I definitely did die editing in this, so pray for me. But yeah, the next installment of this little mini-series is me reviewing the actual end of the Soul Eater anime, the last, 12 episodes or something like that. So that will be, I'm not going to say next week or even in the next 2 weeks because I might be lying, but that will be the next video. Anyways, if you made it through this entire video, thank you first of all. This video is probably long as hell, probably like 20 something minutes. Again, I died editing this, so pray for me. But yeah, thanks. If you enjoyed, I would really appreciate a like or a subscription. We're trying to hit 1,700 subscribers. So yeah, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate all of you hanging in there with me as I've been gone for at least 3 weeks now. This video should be up in about a week by the time I'm recording this. But yeah, thanks for sticking around, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.
So you can handle us, so cool, big scandalous. I'll show you.